Welcome back to Normal Island Live. I'm Lewis. Today we'll be talking about Tulip Siddiq resigning as the anti-corruption minister for possible corruption charges. We're talking about the TikTok ban, and we're talking about the ceasefire deal that may or may not be going ahead in Israel and Gaza. And today I am joined by the wonderful Sarah. Hello, how's it going?
Hi, good to be here. How are you?
Oh, sorry. I had the feed muted. Hi, Sarah.
Oh my God, hello. I thought it was like, are we having tech
No, it's
issues
me.
again? Can you hear
It's
me?
me. It's me. It's so funny
It's good
because
to
we
be
spent a
here.
few minutes making sure all the tech was right before, and then there's me just making a little mistake at the beginning. How are you?
Yes, good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanking you for joining us today. There's just so much going on, and we're about to get Trump in next week. I can't even imagine trying to keep up with the news from next week onwards. I can barely keep up with it now.
It's hard to keep up with. But I don't know. I'm bracing myself for what 2025 has in store, so we'll see.
The next few years, more like as well. Oh,
Literally so true. It's going to be character building.
character building. Well, we'll be here to cover it all. Anyway, we will quickly go through the first story so we can get to my favorite part, which is the discussion. So, Tulip Siddiq has resigned as the Treasury Minister, and also she is the City and Anti-Corruption Minister by title as well. Tulip Siddiq has resigned as the Treasury Minister over allegations about her properties being linked to her aunt, Sheikh Hasina, the former Bangladeshi Prime Minister who was ousted in August after an uprising. Tulip Siddiq has resigned as the Treasury Minister after controversy over her links to her aunt's ousted political movement in Bangladesh. In a letter to Keir Starmer, the Hampstead and Highgate MP said that she had not breached the ministerial code. Continuing in her post would be a distraction from the work of the government. But Sky News, they revealed something very interesting. She was living in a property. I'm so sorry. My notes in front of me have just frozen. Just a second. Apologies. So, what exactly was the link? Well, Tulip Siddiq was living in the same property as Hasina's niece, but it actually gets worse. Tulip Siddiq has sought to distance herself from her aunt, the deposed Bangladeshi PM, Sheikh Hasina, claiming they never spoke about politics. But Sky News can reveal that in a blog written by the now city minister, she boasted about how close they were politically and published photos of them together. In the posts written in late 2008 and 2009, when she was a Labour activist, Ms. Sadiq described campaigning with her aunt in Bangladesh's general election and celebrating her victory. Uh, oh yeah, she they weren't that close at all, but they never spoke about politics. So she seemingly lied about how close she was with her aunt, and with that about her politics too. But who exactly is Sheikh Hasina, the former Bangladeshi PM? A Bangladeshi court has recently ordered an arrest warrant for the former prime minister, who fled into India in August after she was ousted by mass protests. But it gets so much worse. So Hasina is wanted by Bangladesh's International Criminal Tribunal for her alleged involvements of crimes against humanity that took place during these demonstrations in which she was ousted, where hundreds were killed, literally hundreds. In some estimates, it's over 1,000. Hasina, who was in charge of Bangladesh for more than 20 years, was seen as an autocrat whose government ruthlessly clamped down on dissent. Sheikh Hasina was at the helm of those who committed massacres, killings, and crimes against humanity in July to August. Yeah, not really that close with her auntie. She's got pictures with her, and her auntie was a evil autocratic woman who killed civilians. So this was the person that Sadiq was celebrating. Now, I know she's family, but she's family who has been accused of war crimes. And it doesn't really get any better for Sadiq. The flat in London's Hampstead that Tulip Siddiq, the UK city minister, was living in, the UK city minister and ousted Bangladeshi Prime Minister Hasina's niece spent years living in and was bought by an offshore company named in the Panama Papers. And this was connected to two Bangladeshi businessmen. I can't get my words out today, guys. I'm really struggling. This was found by a Sunday Times investigation. The 42-year-old British MP spent several years living in the flat, listing it as her address in 2012 and 2014. And according to the Sunday Times report, Pedrock Ventures, an offshore company registered in the British Virgin Islands, bought the flat for £243,000 in 2000. I'm sure they've made plenty of money since then, seeing as the prices of properties have absolutely skyrocketed. But documents leaked as part of the Panama Papers, remember those, and made available by the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, they demonstrate that Pedrock Adventures was funded through a six-figure loan, later written off by a second offshore company, Harberton SA. So that entity had two shareholders, which was Nassim Ali and Masood Ali, two brothers from Bangladesh. They jointly own a company called I can't say this, Shamolima Limited, registered in Dhaka in 1983, which provides logistics and manpower to foreign oil companies operating in the country. So I really can't get my words out today, guys. I am struggling. I think I really should have drank more coffee today. My brain is just not working. So it's not really a good look for Sadiq at all. Now, if Sadiq thinks that simply resigning means it will be all behind her, she's sorely mistaken. Anti-money laundering officials in Bangladesh have demanded bank account details for Tulip Siddiq, the UK anti-corruption minister, in the latest escalation of the inquiries into her family's financial interests. The Bangladeshi Financial Intelligence Unit, which investigates money laundering and suspicious transactions, wrote to the country's main banks on Tuesday, asking them to provide account details for Sadiq and the 7 members of her family. Officials also asked for the bank account details of Sadiq's aunt, Sheikh Hasina, who was deposed as Bangladeshi's prime minister last year after widespread protests against her rule. Now, Sadiq's mother, her sister, and her brother were also named in the request, which was seen by The Guardian. It's not looking good for the entire family, and it's not looking good for the anti-corruption minister. And there may also be an actual link to Vladimir Putin as well. Bangladesh's Anti-Corruption Commission has begun an investigation into whether Sadiq, a close ally of the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, helped embezzle billions of pounds as part of a deal for the Russian-funded nuclear power plant. So Sadiq was actually pictured alongside her aunt and the Russian President Vladimir Putin in 2013, but has denied allegations that she helped broker a deal with Moscow to help build the project. A spokesperson for Sadiq said that no evidence has been presented for these allegations. Tulip has not been contacted by anyone on the matter and totally refutes the claims. But it's just not looking good for her, is it? It just keeps stacking up. I know it's a lot of information, but this is a huge story. This isn't just about one individual. Now, Sarah, before we talk about Tulip Siddiq specifically, my question is, how did the Labour Party not only allow somebody like Tulip Siddiq to be in the party, but to become the anti-corruption minister? Like, surely at least most of this must have been known beforehand.
Hi, obviously I'm not Sarah. We're still having some more technical difficulties behind the scenes, so huge apologies. But interesting point. It's an interesting story, isn't it, Lewis? The fact that we've ended up in this situation where she's been under investigation in a foreign country. Her name's been brought up numerous times, and then when she's had to resign, this is the thing that's confused me, and I don't know whether you can shed any light on it, but she's had this whole situation where she's had to say that, she's been investigated and the government is saying that she's been found not to have done anything wrong. But the reason why she's resigned is to sort of move the conversation on and prevent her from being a distraction. But I think that's more of a distraction, because if she's not done anything wrong, why is she then resigning? But like you say, how did she even end up in that position? Well, are we really surprised that we've got a Labour government who are already having to get rid of MPs because of problems like this? She's really close with Keir Starmer, and I think it's likely, I've got no evidence of this and I want to avoid a lawsuit, so I'm just going to say that this is my opinion only, but it seems very interesting that, when it's Starmer's ally, they seem to make excuses for her, the hold her on, they kept her in place until it did become a distraction. Whereas, you've got other ministers who, without even thinking twice, Starmer's happy to say, yeah, well, they can go, because he doesn't have that connection with them.
Did you just cut off then?
No, I stopped, but Sarah is back, so I'm going to see if we can get her in. Just give me 1 second.
Apologies for this, guys. So I can't even get my words out today. We're having tech issues with our guest, and it's just not any good for you guys, is it? So I do apologise. Are we getting Sarah back up? I think in the background, Callum is helping Sarah come back up. But the whole thing just really baffles me. I don't know exactly what processes are in place when somebody is either being appointed to be an MP, whether they're being appointed to be in the shadow cabinet, and then the actual cabinet. But it feels like, obviously, journalists, many of them are great. Hello, Sarah. Many journalists are really great at their job, right? They can find things out that other people can't. That's why they're journalists. That's why they're good. You would think that at this level, that the Labour Party, who's got, I don't know, millions, and you okay?
Can you hear me okay? Or does it sound like my laptop's about to take off?
It sounds like it's about to take off. I'm not going to lie.
Probably. Okay.
Perfect. Hello. Just to finish, I just want to finish my little rant. I'm going to throw you back the same question that we were going to ask when we started having tech issues, which is, I don't know what processes are in place for somebody getting in the position that they're in, but surely there is budget within the Labour coffers to actually investigate the background of somebody before they go in. I'm so sorry, Sarah. The background noise is there. It literally sounds like we're inside of a washing machine.
I can't do it. Is it can you hear me? Is it working?
Yeah. It is working, but the new audio that you've come in with now isn't great. Do you think
Okay.
perhaps you can join on your phone or your iPad?
Let me join on my phone. My laptop is so budget that let me come on my phone. I'm gonna have to leave and come back. I'm so sorry.
No problem at all. I'm just looking at the comments for reaction. Obviously, Sarah is a guest, and we did do some tech issues. But we had some tech issues before. We thought we worked through them, but obviously not. So I do apologise to our lovely audience who were waiting patiently for the show to start after. But don't worry, we'll get these sorted out. But I can just continue my rant in the meantime, which is I don't know what processes are in place, but Labour have deep pockets. They've got tens of millions of pounds in their coffers. I don't understand why there isn't either a private process in place or something even funded through the government or something to make sure that these people who are coming into power don't have these crazy and dodgy backgrounds. It just doesn't make sense to me how they couldn't even find out some of this information. There are PIs out there, private investigators, hire them. I don't know what it takes, background checks. I have literally no idea. But I don't understand how somebody in her position can not only become an MP, but then obviously get into the cabinet, into the position of the city and anti-corruption minister. It simply baffles me. I think they're still testing in the background. Somehow we're getting gifted memberships from people, which I will thank you absolutely for, despite all the insane tech issues, despite the fact that I can't apparently speak English today. But, let's just make this more of a fun and casual show. Hello, Sarah.
I'm back, and I
With
think
perfect audio.
I'm so sorry. I can't believe this is my day today. Gosh.
Hi. Take a breath.
Hey.
Take a second. Just take a moment.
Let's just decompress and talk about Tulip Siddiq. Let's get
Tulip
straight
Siddiq.
into it.
So the question before was, aside from the actual allegations and everything against her, how is it that somebody like this can not only become an MP, not only then get, put in Keir Starmer's main team, be one of Keir Starmer's main and allies and closest friends, but then also get a position as a minister, despite this background?
The irony is that she's an anti-corruption minister, and then the allegations against her are all to do with corruption. And I'm like, Tulip, how are you going to get out of this? Like, this is feeling a bit sticky. But then on top of that, it's even Bangladeshi authorities who are also trying to have these allegations against her too. So I'm like, how is she going to navigate allegations coming from both sides, British authorities and Bangladeshi authorities? But then what worries me is how it's going to make people view the Labour Party. I think we're already, well, I didn't vote for Labour, so I don't know, I was saying we, but I am kind of siding with the Labour Party in that they are the ones in governance at the moment. So I'm wanting things to be a lot better than the 14 years of austerity that we faced. But we are under a microscope, essentially. So it's any wrong move and it's going to look incredibly bad for Starmer. So I don't know how it's going to look long term for Starmer and his decision making, his short sightedness. I think when it comes to Tulip's past and these slight misdemeanors that are now being held against her. So yeah, it's looking sticky.
Very sticky. It's just interesting how, we have so much information out there that's available, and the reporters from the Times and Sky News, they can so quickly find out all this information. And again, yeah, that's what they're paid for. That's what their industry is absolutely built on.
Mm,
But I just don't understand how the Labour Party don't have processes in place which are better at finding these people. Like, fine, maybe somebody can sneak in as an MP with a dodgy past, but then to even get to the level of, it's not a cabinet position, a minister. It's just absolutely wild to me. What's also interesting is that I'll play devil's advocate for a moment. I've got a friend. Well, former friend. It was my friend's ex-girlfriend. She came from a very rich family, and she had like a fancy apartment in Leeds city centre when I used to live there. And she was like, "Yeah, but it's in my dad's name. It's like in another family member's name. Like, is it? I'm not saying like they've done anything wrong, but the point that I'm going to get at is that, like, yeah, maybe her dad's put it in that name and done something with it, which could maybe be illegal. I'm not saying it is. The point that I'm trying to make is that, did my friend's girlfriend know that by living in that apartment that she might be a part of something that could be illegal? And the same could be said for Tulip. She comes from a very rich family, and if
mm,
somebody's just going to say to her, like someone in her family, "Oh yeah, you can live in this flat, or we can pass this property to you in this way," like, it is possible she didn't know that it might be attached to corruption or money laundering or anything like that. I want to give her that benefit of the doubt, because I do know people who do dodgy things and put things in different people's names without actually knowing it's complicit. I've got another friend who was like, their mother wanted to like do this dodgy thing with the will and like move some things around, and I was just like, make sure you check that out first before they go ahead and do that. It could be, a bit dodgy. It's very possible, but even still, the fact that this may haunt Labour for a while now. I don't know. Will it? A lot of people are saying, like, will we care about this in 2 or 3 years? I don't know, because we don't know what could happen in 2 or 3 years. We could have a moment where she's been fully investigated in 2 years. And I don't know, maybe the Bangladeshi government are trying to extradite the former anti corruption minister for the Labour Party. It could be more ammo to be used against Labour further down the line, but they just seem to be tripping up themselves. Who knows what other skeletons are in the closet for the rest of them?
mm. Yeah, completely agree. And I think it does worry me. It does worry me entirely to think that they are making their own mistakes. But I feel like this is a country that knows how to hold grudges against certain parties. So is this something that they will let go of? Quite possibly, because something bigger will probably happen this year or in the years to come that will be garnering so much more attention than Tulip. But what's interesting is her extensive history when it comes to the organisations that she's been associated with, things like Save the Children or Amnesty International. Like, she has a great reputation. So when she has something like this attached to her name, will it tarnish her? I don't know, because there have been plenty of politicians who arguably could have not been in politics anymore for the things that they've said and done, but have still managed to make quite a success. Farage being one of them, Boris Johnson making it into 10 Downing Street, and he's had a very problematic history. So yeah, I don't know what the future holds for Tulip, but I
I, I
guess we'll just have
I was just
to
going to say though
wait
very
and
quickly,
see.
like, another thing that frustrates me about this story is that if you remember Keir Starmer's rhetoric when he was
Mm,
running for, when during the election, I can't remember the exact phrasing that he used. Maybe someone in the comments can remind me, but it was along the lines of, "Everybody's got one chance and that's it, you're out." Essentially,
mm,
talking about his cabinet. Anything comes up, it looks dodgy, you're gone. I can't remember what the exact phrasing was, but so far we've seen that Louise Hay came in, and she claims, and other people claim, that they knew that about her previous conviction from over 10 years ago. Many people stipulate that Morgan McSweeney, the shadow prime minister, as some people like to call him, is the one who ultimately leaked the story and ousted her. But again, that's
mm,
speculation. We know that Sue Gray was in a civil war with Morgan McSweeney, and ultimately he won because somebody was leaking stories about Sue Gray, which ultimately ended up in her leaving and Morgan McSweeney taking her place. We have no evidence that Morgan McSweeney is behind this, because I don't think he has anything to do with the investigation coming out of Bangladesh. But the point I'm trying to make is that so far it's been such a mess. will we care about this in a few years? We had people we had scandals at the beginning of Tony Blair's government in
True.
'97 and '98. People don't remember those people now. Nobody can name any of them. I can't remember them. I just know that they happened. Um, but it seems that the Labour Party have obviously got a problem because they might have other people in their team, in their cabinet, who have got skeletons waiting to come out, which could eventually either topple the government, put take confidence that's out of the market. We've got people speculating that Rachel Reeves won't be in charge any
Mm.
longer of the finances of the country, but they've said that she's going to be here until the next election. But of course they're going to say that. It all just looks very unstable. And I want the country to do well. You said that earlier. They're in power. We want them to succeed for the country. But this unstableness, if it is unstableness, that's a word. Yes.
Instability? I don't know.
It's a word.
Uh, Maybe it is now.
It's a word now. This unstableness. I'm very scared every time I see stories like this because all I can think about is how Reform or the Conservatives might gain power in 4 years based off of the mess that they're making,
Yeah.
essentially.
I completely agree, and actually, this is something that could be absolutely weaponized to assert a political agenda by rival parties. But what's interesting about the comment that you'd said that Starmer had made, where it was like a one chance and you're out type thing, I don't think will be the case. But I think I'm gonna choose my words carefully here, because when she had handed in her resignation, he had said, well, I want to be clear that the door remains open for you going forward. So it's like, is there a possibility that she'll be able to venture back into her ministerial duties going forward? Or will they actually be able to mandate accountability in the party so that this is like we do not tolerate this sort of behaviour. This is not going to happen going forward. You can trust us. So yeah, I think it's just having to keep them under just a close eye on the Labour Party to see how they're going to go forward with this. But it is interesting you mentioned Rachel Reeves as well, because I think now they've kind of backed off a little bit, given that there's been 0.1% of growth, and they're like, oh, like there's something good happening slightly. So we'll see how things go. But again, I think we'll have to wait and see.
I think we will have to wait and see. Like, obviously, there could possibly be a future where, they get a hold of the bank details, they find something, they might even want to extradite her. I don't know how that
Oh,
works. Does it go through the Attorney General? Who knows? But it's just going to possibly cause more of a mess for Labour in the future because it's not one of those stories like Louise Hay where it's just like she did this thing that's wrong, it's come out and she's gone. She's probably not going to cause any problems for the future. But this is a story that could keep biting them in the arse depending on what the Bangladeshi authorities find or what other journalists might find out about Tulip because they've only just started digging. So
true.
more might come out. I'm going to jump on to the next story. Hopefully now all the tech issues are resolved. We do apologise, guys, but thank you for staying with us. But I'm going to move on to a completely different story from the US. The ban of TikTok. The ban of TikTok in the United States is set to start on Sunday, the 19th, so the day before Trump is inaugurated. But of course, we've had a huge outcry, not just from the people who love the app, but of course from its content creators and businesses who found a lot of success through the app. And it could also cost the US economy literally billions. Now, some people are stipulating and reporting that it could be the influence of AIPAC, the pro-Israeli lobby. They could be behind the ban. They've been urging Congress to ban the app, as it's been, incredibly important in bringing to light the atrocities that Israel has committed. We know from very solid reporting done over the last few years, even before Gaza was being talked about, that Meta spent tens of millions of dollars lobbying Congress to get rid of TikTok. We also know that Trump threatened to ban it during his previous administration, with companies like Microsoft attempting to acquire it. They actually came really close to a deal. Like Microsoft almost bought TikTok, but the news cycle moves so fast that I think most of us just kind of forgot about it. But fast forward to the Biden administration, who signed a bill in April 2024, which passed overwhelmingly. It was like 300 to 50 votes. It was very popular, this bill. They passed it and said that TikTok poses a danger to the country and to and is a national security risk, and provided absolutely no evidence to the public on why. It seemed to all be based on hypotheticals on how the Chinese government could use it, but actually provided no evidence that they were doing it. So now we have the US, the beacon of freedom, and all the liberties in the world, banning apps from its population based off of simply no evidence. The bill stipulated that if ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, it must sell their US branch of TikTok to an American company. So this doesn't affect TikTok anywhere else in the world, just America. But they have to sell it to an American company or they will be banned and removed from the app stores. They have until January 19th, this Sunday, to complete the sale. But since we've had lots of court battles, which have all failed, ultimately it led us to the Supreme Court, where TikTok appealed to them on the First Amendment rights, the free speech, which Americans love so much. Now, we expected to hear from the Supreme Court yesterday, but no opinions came down from the court. So we don't really know what's happening. There have been some reporting over the last few hours that TikTok might activate an extension that was put into the bill, which would give them a few more months. We've also seen some reporting that the Biden administration is seeing what they can do to stop the bill, despite the fact that, they were the ones who signed the original bill, which was banning TikTok. And we now know that the Trump administration has said that they will fight for TikTok to come back too, despite wanting to ban it during their administration. The entire thing is just a mess. But Trump's change of heart might have something to do with one of his biggest donors having huge investments in TikTok, but it also might have something to do with TikTokers flooding to another Chinese social media app called Rednote, where people are now posting videos of them learning Chinese and making memes about being TikTok refugees. The app actually went to #1 in the App Store. It kind of shows how the TikTok ban was just kind of pointless anyway. Sarah, have you joined Rednote?
No, not yet. Is this my sign to join it though? I don't know.
Are
No,
you
I
on the
haven't.
side of TikTok that's like all the Rednote memes?
No, I haven't. I think my TikToks are really boring. It just shows things about my job, which is really so boring. Telling me to quit. No, I'm joking. But no, I haven't joined yet. But I do find this really interesting because I've seen a lot of American creators be like, is this them trying to censor our free speech? Our First Amendment is essentially the right to exercise free speech, etc., etc. So is this if this was actually going to happen, if it actually did come into fruition, would this just be a complete I don't know, is it the First Amendment? What?
Yeah, First Amendment
Yeah,
free
the First
speech,
Amendment's about
right
free
to a
speech.
free speech, right to a
Yeah.
free press, right to assembly.
Does this
People in the
completely
comments will very
breach the
quickly
First
correct me.
Amendment? Like, would this completely, like, entirely, this completely go against the First Amendment in that they are completely being censored from an app where they've been able to make quite a bit of money? So I don't even know how a TikTok ban would practically work in the US, given that many people access this app and make a living out of it, but also use TikTok as a means to, as a source of news, which I have a bit of issue with, but yeah, they access this app daily, and I don't know how that could possibly function in a country that is so staunch on having free speech.
I think what's interesting, and it's completely off topic, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but you'll get literal conspiracy theorists, and we've definitely met both of them. This type of conspiracy theories where they'll say that like, the pandemic was used to see how what's the word? How willing people are just to go along with the government, like to like ready our mind to be what's the word I'm looking for? I've gone blank. But basically, the pandemic was used to see how we would be susceptible to just doing what they say. And I find it interesting how, when you combine that with the conspiracy theories, with the idea of free speech in the
Mm.
US, with how vocal Americans are on this, like literally videos raking up hundreds and hundreds of millions of views literally daily about this topic. But ultimately, I still don't see like kind of that much outrage. I don't see protests. I see people just moaning about it. And I just find it interesting how Americans have actually been very like willing just to let this happen, despite their perceived outrage. It's not come with much action, but that's just from what I've seen personally.
I would
Um,
agree. I would agree. I haven't seen much conspiratorial thinking. There probably is some out there, but I haven't come across it just yet. I mean, I'd assume that their attitude. I was reading an article recently, like, how will the users actually be affected if a TikTok ban happens? And I think one of them had said that it's stressful, but we'll be fine. It's just going to be a
That's the
hard
word I was
hit.
looking for. Sorry. Thank you, Simon.
Oh, compliant. Yeah, it's just going to be a hard hit. So I don't even think like you said, I don't think they're actually too impacted by that. But I do
Hmm.
wonder. I mean, I'm thinking now, those who work for TikTok in the US, like, what will happen to those employees if something like this was supposed to, it actually happens, or what will advertisers do? Not that I care about these corporations that are benefiting so much from TikTok, but I do wonder about those that work for the app and actually do have employment with them. Will they be impacted by this? Will they then have to? Are they now in this bracket of confused job seekers where they don't know where they're going after this? So I guess that's. I don't know. I'm not sure where it's going to go from here.
But
Um,
there's definitely loads of ripple effects though on in terms of like the economy.
mm,
I seen one headline which was like it's going to cost the US economy $22 billion a year. I'm sure there's very smart people out there who can estimate these things, but I feel like if you're not necessarily a TikToker, you might not fully understand like the reach and effect of TikTok, because obviously, yeah, you've got the business side of things. We get those annoying videos on TikTok which is constantly trying to sell us things, not just ads, but like literal users trying to sell us stuff from the TikTok shop. But then you've also got like small businesses. You know who Keith Lee is, for example, the food reviewer, the black guy from Las Vegas in America.
no. I
I'm
live
way
under a rock.
I spend way
You're
too much
asking
time on
someone who
TikTok.
had a laptop that was making a takeoff sound, so I'm probably the first person to ask.
Don't worry, don't worry. But yeah, no, Keith Lee, for example, he just goes around and reviews all these different restaurants, usually small businesses, family owned, and like just by him going to them, the next day there will be literal lines around the block. Hundreds of people will turn up. And I know that's like a minuscule example, but this is just one user. There are thousands of these like food reviewers, for example, who literally boost businesses. We have an influx. There was an article from months ago that was talking about the effect on tourism that TikTok had,
Mm,
promoting like so many Americans are coming to London now because of like this romanticization of London through TikTok. And there's all these like secondary effects of it. So I don't think you can really truly measure the effect that it will have on like the economy, on people, on businesses. I'm sure there's some smart people out there who can try and work it out. But ultimately it comes down to this idea, and this is where we start to sound American, where it's like, I feel like it's a massive impingement on like some sort of liberty that's out there.
yeah,
I would accept a ban if they could literally prove this is the Chinese government literally trying to indoctrinate you. Here's propaganda. Here's evidence of them trying to manipulate the algorithm for you to hate your government, all of these types of things. But from what I read in the past, this is all based off of hypotheticals of what the Chinese government could do in theory, but there's actually no evidence. And I actually find that quite scary, especially because this came from a democratic president as well. I just
agreed.
find it quite scary that people can just be like, yeah, we'll let this ban and app be banned. Fascist
Mm.
countries ban things. They ban books. They ban information.
That's what I was about to say. I was about to say this. Like, this is TikTok. Everyone can have their opinions of it, and some can be negative, but there are positives to this social platform. And I think in some ways it could be considered a democratic social platform. Is it a form of anti intellectualism to completely remove people's access to an app that could be a source of knowledge or resource or news? So I do think that it's scary. I mean, it's a culturally defining platform that I think has shifted the way that we access resources and all sorts. So yeah, is this, like you said, an infringement upon democracy somehow, some way? Because that people do exert their opinions on TikTok, whether that by means of making videos, or whether that be by means of accessing live platforms where they can actually give their input on certain topics. So yeah, I'm interested to see how it's going to go.
Also, as well, like, because the entire thing's a mess, right? We've got Biden who signed the bill, and then apparently his administration trying to find ways to either unban it or extend it. We've got the Trump administration who previously wanted to ban it, who's now saying they don't want to ban it and they want to somehow reverse it or override it. And then on top of that, a few days ago, as our producer Callum, who subbed in for you for a few minutes earlier, we have a senator in the US who introduced a bill to extend the ban to, I think it was like months and months down the line. I can't remember the exact time frame. It
Mm,
just seems like a complete mess. To me, at the moment, it kind of just seems like they actually just tried to do a big bluff. and we've got to the end of the bluff. They haven't sold off, and now they don't want to basically force it to leave. It just seems completely and utterly messy. I don't know.
It feels messy because I think there's so many unanswered questions, and there's still, I think, like you said, 20 billion here, 22 billion here. I mean, what's the difference between 20 and 22 billion? Who knows? But like all of these facts coming out of nowhere from different articles, I feel like it is all over the place, and it feels overwhelmingly rushed. I feel like this news story came up out of nowhere. And maybe there were utterances of it being banned in some places. I think there was this happening a few months ago, but I don't think anyone thought that it would actually come into fruition. And then all of a sudden, yes. So on this date, this is probably when it's going to be gone. And I'm seeing people on TikTok saying bye, bye, bye TikTok, blah blah blah. And I'm like, this is feeling a bit dramatic. And yeah, like you said, incredibly rushed and messy.
It's just all over the place. I obviously we'll see what happens. We may see a period where TikTok actually does get removed from the App Store for a few days,
Yeah.
maybe, and the Trump administration comes in. We may see TikTok activate the extension, which I think is around 90 days that they can activate within the legislation, but could be rejected, and we might get TikTok for another few months and more people posting memes about being TikTok refugees. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. I think another thing that kind of scares me is that like Biden has kind of set up Trump to be the rescuer of this. Another mess that he's created where Trump is going to come in and he's going to be like, I saved TikTok. Thank you. You're welcome. I get all the credit because that's what he loves. And
True.
it's just setting him up for further success in the future. Just seems messy.
Yeah.
We are going to come to some questions. Do we sorry, questions or comments, whatever you guys want. Do producer Callum, do we have anything ready to go? Have we been saving some comments?
I'm slightly nervous, actually.
You're nervous. People are probably going to give us feedback about like how terrible all the tech issues are.
True. It's not normally this messy at all,
Oh,
ever.
it's fine. It's fine. Callum, do we have any comments? Perfect. So, Jacqueline, hello. Lovely to see you again. Does anyone feel that the excuse of the US government is using for banning TikTok is not the real reason, and that the real reason is the huge anti Zionist and pro Palestinian content by Gen Z? Yeah, so this is obviously something that's being theorized. We know that APAC, the pro Israeli lobby, the very, very rich pro Israeli lobby, has got very deep pockets and they're very powerful. There hasn't been lots of solid reporting on their influence over this specifically. There's been a lot of speculation, but it would make sense historically for them to push for something like this because TikTok, out of all the social media platforms, not biased just because I use TikTok the most, but out of all the social media platforms, it's probably been like the most pro-Palestine.
Yeah.
That's the one where all the videos go viral. That's where traction is built. That's where people have been organizing. That's where people have been sharing information, especially because that news article came out a few weeks ago proving that Instagram was actually suppressing Gaza-related stories. So that came up. What do you think, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. I think TikTok has opened up practically an entire generation calling out to the end of the atrocities in Gaza. I think my algorithm is always pointing towards the atrocities that happen in Gaza and an end to it as well. So it could possibly be the case that people or these invisible people who are really trying to take TikTok down could be wanting to suppress voices. But this is why I do think I would classify TikTok as a democratic social platform where people can exercise their agency and autonomy to give these opinions without fear of being suppressed in any way. But then again, is this a form of suppression to be like, stop talking about things that are out of your jurisdiction?
I think one thing that surprised me the most about TikTok specifically on the this topic specifically with Israel, Gaza, these types of stories is that People could talk about how the media is complicit in so many things, which they are. I think sometimes it's on purpose. Sometimes I think it's just that they have a bias to go for certain stories which are hotter topics. But one thing that shocked me since October 7th, and paying more attention to stories from that region, is that I read Israeli media every single day. And there are so many stories that I think are relevant to do with the ongoing story in Gaza in the West Bank that you just never see in Western media. I was doing
Mm,
some research earlier for a future video, and I was looking for clippings from news articles just to reference them in a video. And I was just so shocked to see how so many of these things were just reported on by either whether it's Israeli media or Asian media, but they just weren't in the Western media at all. Not one single source, not one single person reporting on it, not one video, not one news article. And it's really frustrating because that is what TikTok has done. It's opened the eyes to lots of people to say that we need to dig deeper to find out what's really going on. And I don't think it's generally some big conspiracy. In some aspects, it is, depending on where you look. I'm pointing at Owen Jones's story about the BBC. Go check that out if anybody knows what I'm talking about. However, I just think it's more to do with the fact that if you care about something, you really have to go out there and look for the information
mm,
yourself rather than just relying on an algorithm feeding it to you. Because it's not TikTok itself who's given me a lot of this information, it's the fact that TikTok's kind of pointed me in that direction, if that makes
mm.
sense.
Absolutely, completely agree with you. And I do think that maybe if TikTok was to go, it might be an unquantifiable loss to those that invest so much time in it to give out this information. Like yourself, Lewis, you literally just admitted to doing extensive research before you actually put a video out there. How many Lewises are out there that do the exact same thing? There are plenty of you out there that do that same exact thing. So lots of us who are viewers access that sort of information and do go down these avenues that we've been pointed
Mm.
down by TikTok. And it is, I think it's an indispensable part of a journalistic toolkit that lots of people do use. And I think it has opened up a lot of people's eyes into what media literacy is all about. Do we just go for these mainstream media outlets and listen to the BBC and Channel 4? I probably sound ridiculous right now, but it's true though. I feel like there's always these stereotypical news stations that we go to, but actually this has opened up a wonderful door to represent global audiences and
Mm.
speak on global issues. So I don't think it's a far-fetched conspiratorial idea. I do think that media has its biases, but TikTok has allowed for reportage to be somewhat unbiased and objective in some way or another.
Well, speaking of somebody who's got no media literacy, Elon Musk, Liam Rooney. I can't speak today, guys.
It's
What is
okay, it's the
wrong
end of the
with
week.
me? Oh, Liam Rooney. Wouldn't be surprised if Elon Musk buys it and uses it for more undue influence. So this was reported on. Can't remember who by that. Elon Musk was like looking into buying TikTok. I don't think he can afford it. Yeah, it's been reported recently that he's now worth about $500 billion. TikTok is estimated. It's not a publicly traded company. It's estimated to be somewhere in the region of $1 to $200 billion. When he bought Twitter, it was around, was it 44 billion? I
Something
think if I
around
remember
that.
correctly, 30 billion was his, but that was his stocks that he owned mostly. And then the other 14 billion came from various banks. One person who also invested was P. Diddy, fun fact. And various other people invested to make up the other 14 billion so Twitter could be bought. I don't think Elon Musk would be willing to let go of that much stock because it could actually affect his position in his company because he needs to maintain an overall majority in these companies to maintain his power, whether it's through SpaceX, which is not publicly traded, but he still owns an X amount of shares within them privately. And also with Tesla, I can't remember what his ownership is there. It's something like 40% or
I
something.
don't
And he needs to
know.
maintain his power. So if he were to buy TikTok, he would potentially lose his majority power within his companies by using those
Mm.
stocks.
Yeah, and I don't think that he's that much of an impulsive man when it comes to his money. I think he's impulsive in things that he says because he wants to trigger those around him. But when it comes to his money, I don't think he'll be spending so frivolously. Um, I don't also think that Liam is being far-fetched in Elon Musk's approaches when it comes to social media. His intentions behind purchasing what was known as Twitter and now is known as X was essentially centered around this whole idea of speech and freedom of speech and blah 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 and the censorship idea. Would it be a far-fetched idea? No, not entirely, but is it practical or feasible for Elon Musk to do? probably not. So yeah.
It'd just die anyway. Like the people who would stay on Twitter would be the same people who just go to TikTok, meaning the app would just die, and then it would just become a echo chamber of people who just like Elon Musk, just like the way Twitter is now. The only reason why Twitter is actually still afloat is because so many of the legacy journalists, so many of the legacy media outlets and politicians are actually still posting news and information on there. Loads of them are. Very few people have actually quit. If all those people pulled out, Twitter would be nothing.
Would cease
X,
to
whatever.
exist.
What was that?
It would cease to exist. Yeah, sorry, I spoke over
And the
you.
same with TikTok, but TikTok doesn't necessarily have most of that. Like a lot of these like legacy journalists, they aren't posting 10 times a day on TikTok, right? I don't think a lot of the content people would continue to post content on this site. They wouldn't want to live in the same environment as X, so they'd just leave too. It'd just be a mess and big waste of money. And plus, he wouldn't be able to pay for all of himself. He would have to get backers. And I think after the fact that that X is now worth like less than half the price of what he bought it for, or even less, I don't think anybody's going to help invest with him because it wouldn't be a good investment. I don't know.
Agreed.
James Holmes gifted 5 Turn Left memberships. Thank you so much, James. Despite the fact of all of our messy today, the fact that I can't speak English, that I can't seem to get words out or bring them out of my brain, despite all the tech issues, we thank you. We thank you. We thank you so much for the memberships. Hi, Edward. Quality leftist tech tonight. Please help fund indie media.
It's just me. I'm the problem. I refuse to buy another laptop. That's my problem.
Yes, if you would like to support Turn Left, please do so. That would be great. But we thank you for the memberships, and as always, Edward, thank you for your comments. I think that's it for the comments now. So thank you very much. We will go on to our last story. So Israel is looking to potentially sabotage the ceasefire deal. Of course, before I start with the story, lots of information is coming out. This might not be completely up to date. We'll talk more at the end about some information that might have come out just before the show. So we will go ahead with what we've got now and extend it from there. To the surprise of no one, though, the recent ceasefire deal may fall apart because of, you guessed it, Israel. So we have the original agreement. A ceasefire agreement involving a release of hostages has been reached after more than a year of deadly fighting in Gaza. The deal outlines a 6-week initial ceasefire phase that includes a gradual withdrawal of Israeli forces from central Gaza and the return of Palestinians to North Gaza. The Reuters news agency reported, citing an official brief of the agreement. Now, Hamas will release 33 hostages, including all women, children, and men over the age of 50, the agency said. In return, Israel will release hundreds of Palestinian detainees. Now, there will also be a surge of humanitarian aid allowed into Gaza as part of the agreement. But again, we will see if Israel stick to that part of their agreement, as they've historically been very bad at letting aid into Gaza. However, Benjamin Netanyahu is delaying the vote due to a last-minute extortion from Hamas. Benjamin Netanyahu has delayed his security cabinet's vote on the ceasefire deal after accusing Hamas of backtracking on the agreement. The Israeli Prime Minister claimed Hamas was trying to extort last-minute concessions and said the Israeli cabinet will not meet to ratify the deal until Hamas breaks down. An earlier statement from his office said that Hamas was objecting to a part of the agreement that gave Israel the ability to veto the release of certain Palestinian prisoners, but Mr. Netanyahu told his negotiators to stand firm on the earlier agreement. Now, a senior Hamas official told AFP that there was no basis to Israeli allegations and that Hamas remained committed to the deal announced last night. First off, if Israel is refusing to hand over certain Palestinian prisoners, that sounds more like an obstacle from Israel's side. However, there hasn't been evidence of this, and Hamas has denied it, saying they're committed to the deal. Not only is Netanyahu delaying the vote, but other members of his government, Ben Gvir specifically, and Bezalel Smotrich, they don't want a ceasefire. Smotrich has only agreed to the first phase of the deal. So, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich expressed conditional support on Thursday for the support of the first phase of the proposed hostage deal, emphasizing that Israel must resume its campaign to eliminate Hamas immediately after. So, Smotrich insisted that the agreement should not undermine the war's achievements, but instead ensure the destruction of Hamas and the safe return of all the hostages. He added that the continuation of the war is a prerequisite for his hardline religious Zionist party remaining in the coalition. So Smotrich has Smotrich has demanded written assurances from the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu that Israel will resume its military operations in Gaza after the initial phase of the deal, which involves the release of 33 hostages over 42 days. So, despite signs from Netanyahu's office suggesting guarantees could be provided, Smotrich noted that several key issues remain unresolved. Um, Obviously, again, there's more information coming out at the time, so we will see how it changes. But in essence, Smotrich wants the ability to receive the hostages and then continue the destruction of Gaza. That is not a ceasefire. Ben-Gvir has just openly called for the Knesset to oppose this deal, even bragging about sabotaging past deals. I call on my colleague, the finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, to join forces with me, and together we'll work against the nascent deal. This is what the far-right minister said on Twitter. In the last year, using our political power, we managed to prevent this deal from going ahead time after time. Just openly saying how he doesn't care about Israeli hostages. Sarah, are you surprised about this, or did you think people were too naive and were too quick to jump on the ceasefire news when it had not actually been fully agreed upon?
Quite literally, when it had been announced that there was a ceasefire, my immediate reaction was like, I don't trust it. I don't trust it at all. I don't trust that they're going to abide to international law in any way whatsoever if this happened tomorrow. I know that it's not going to happen until the 19th, but still, I was like, I don't think people need which is so sad to say. I think it's heartbreaking to say that, guys, don't jump the gun. Like, let's just you know be a steer on the side of caution. There was nothing reliable when it came to the announcement of the ceasefire, because we've seen Israel time and time again completely subvert or go against everything that they've pledged to do. Immediately after the ceasefire has been announced, we're seeing that the number is now amounted to 80 Palestinians being killed in Israeli airstrikes. And it's so sad. I think this is the saddest part to it. I get so heartbroken every single time when I say that I am just not surprised that this turmoil and this carnage and these barbaric acts are continuing to unfold in the way that they're unfolding. So what we're also seeing now is that there's just this split in these political leaderships as well, where you've got this extremist national minister in Israel being like, well, if he decides to ratify it, then I'm quitting this cabinet entirely. And it's like, I don't even see where they're going with this. There is a reluctance on Israel's part to entirely quit Gaza, and I don't know if that will happen despite a ceasefire, and I'm using that term so loosely, happening or coming into the conversation.
Well, just to remind anybody watching about things that have happened in the past, Bezalel Smotrich and Itamar Ben-Gvir have openly called for the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians multiple times. Ben-Gvir has convictions against him related to terrorist-related activity. Smotrich is the guy who's currently in charge of the administration of the West Bank, where a record number of settlements, Palestinian settlements, have been destroyed, and a record new number of Jewish settlements have been arising. They arm the settlers in the West Bank to go and terrorize Palestinians. These people are not only just far-right extremists, but when you add far-right extremists and religious into that, it gets even more complicated, because they genuinely believe through their religion that this land is absolutely theirs. Because people sometimes get confused between secular Zionism and religious Zionism. Obviously, they have the same goal. They think Israel is their land and all of it should be theirs, but they have different belief systems which power them. And specifically for these two people and their two respective parties, they want all of it. They want more. They want South Lebanon. They want parts of Saudi Arabia that they think is theirs. They want parts of Syria, which they've already taken some of since the Syrian government collapsed. They want parts of Egypt. They want the Sinai Desert. They want Transjordan. They want everything, and they will do anything that they want and let as many Israelis die in their pathway to get these pieces of land at any opportunity. And just to quickly reference when Ben-Gvir is saying we've already sank previous deals, the one I know for a fact he's referring to is that, does everybody remember when Netanyahu went to New York at the UN and did his speech? People walked out. That day, it was reported from multiple people on the US side that Benjamin Netanyahu verbally agreed to a ceasefire deal. And then the second he went to his cabinet, these two ministers, they said, we'll collapse the government if you go ahead with this deal. And then a few hours later, he ordered the assassination of the Hezbollah leader while he was in New York. And yeah, they're right. They've sank deals. They have a majority of 69. The two far right extremists have 14 seats. If they pull out, they no longer have a majority. Benjamin Netanyahu won't be prime minister too much longer, and he's on trial. And he's trying to use his prime ministership to stay in power. So I just want to add that in there as well, because that is the undercurrent of everything that is going on right now. Got two religious extremists and a prime minister who's trying to save his own ass.
Yeah. Do you
And
think
that's what's holding up this conflict right now.
do you think it's possible that they might win a bit more of a popularity in terms of their seats, these national extremist groups or these parties? Because I'm seeing in these articles and on the news a lot that there are quite a few protests unfolding in Israel where they've got these makeshift coffins that are to represent the lives that will potentially be lost if the ceasefire actually takes place, because they don't trust that it will be a ceasefire. So, yeah, I guess that's my question to you. Do you think that they will gain popularity and momentum, given that there is this axis of resistance currently happening in Israel at the moment?
We have to wait and see until the next elections hit. It's so hard to say, because the public know, the Israeli public do know that these two parties have been holding up the hostage deals, and that's the reason why more hostages have died, why more soldiers have died on Israel's side. And I'm just trying to speak from the Israeli perspective here. That might win them more popularity amongst people who are just like more extreme, perhaps, but also then it could lose them voters too. The thing is, like, almost like the Reform Party, who, again, I don't want to put them in the same extreme as Smotrich, despite the fact that they are still quite extreme. That the people who are going to vote Reform are going to vote Reform. I just don't think they're going anywhere, and they've already got their 14 seats. I can't imagine them losing seats over this. So I think the only way that they can go is gaining them. And another kind of fact to add on to this, a really good article actually The Guardian did about a year ago, is explaining how the secular population of Israel, the non-religious part, are shrinking in population. They're not having as many babies as the religious side. And it's the more hardline religious groups as well who are having loads and loads of babies. And there will be a point in the future where the secular population will be completely and utterly outnumbered by the really more staunch religious type. So what's happening now is probably potentially nothing compared to what could be happening in just a few decades in this region, as you've got more extremely hardline religious Zionists being born in Israel and essentially taking over.
Yeah, I think as well there will be, and I use this verbiage all the time, but a sense of social resentment, given how this 15-month conflict has unfolded in the way that it has. I think it's only fair to say that it is incredibly emotive and laborious for anyone who's really directly involved in this. So their ties to this, the devastation of what they believe is their I'm speaking also on the Israeli side, the devastation of their territory and what could potentially be theirs and what they feel is rightfully theirs, I think will have them harboring social resentment to Palestinians, and that is something that I'm very fearful of. And I think I was having this discussion today. Someone had said, well, if someone was invading your land in the way that it's happening currently, how would you feel towards it? And I think the only answer that I think is appropriate is that you would rightfully be quite angry at that. So I'm also thinking on the Palestinian side, how are they going to feel given that they've had to endure a 15-month war, a 15-month genocide, a conflict that's unfolded in the way that it has. The resentment on both sides, I think, will be incredibly rife. So I don't know if this ceasefire sounds good on paper. Will it actually be something that will stay true to its definition? I'm not quite sure.
We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But now, since the announcement of the ceasefire deal, of course, we've heard responses from global leaders, including our own. This is Keir Starmer's statement. After months of devastating bloodshed and countless lives lost, this is the long overdue news that the Israeli and Palestinian people have desperately been waiting for. They have borne the brunt of the conflict, triggered by brutal terrorists of Hamas who committed the deadliest massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust on October 7th. 2023. The hostages, or as Keir Starmer once said, the sausages, who were brutally ripped from their homes on the day that that day and held captive in unimaginable conditions ever since, can now finally return to their families. But we should also use this moment to pay tribute to those who won't make it home, including the British people who were murdered by Hamas. We will now continue to mourn and remember them. For the innocent Palestinians whose homes turned into a war zone overnight, and for the many who have lost their lives, this ceasefire must allow for a huge surge in humanitarian aid, which is also desperately needed to end the suffering in Gaza. And then our attention must turn to how we secure a permanently better future for the Israeli and Palestinian people, grounded in a two-state solution that will guarantee security and stability for Israel alongside a sovereign and viable Palestinian state. The UK and its allies will continue to be at the forefront of these crucial efforts to break the cycle of violence and secure long-term peace in the Middle East. I think it's worth noting that Starmer calls this the worst attack on Jewish people since the Holocaust, that the hostages were brutally ripped from their homes on that day and held captive in unimaginable conditions. But when talking about Palestinians, their homes turned into a war zone overnight, and the Palestinians, many of them have lost their lives, like brutally ripped versus lost their life. Like, even in this statement, you can see the bias. We also have a statement from David Lammy. Today's announcement of a ceasefire agreement is a moment of hope after over a year of agony following Hamas's appalling attack on the 7th of October 2023. So for the hostages and their loved ones, including British citizen Emily Damari and Eli Sharabi, Odef I'm really bad at pronouncing names, Oded Lifshitz and Avanitan Or, this has been an unbearable trauma for the people of Gaza and so many people who have lost their lives, homes, and loved ones. This has been a living nightmare. For the region, this has brought yet more division and conflict. With this agreement, hostages and their families will be reunited and Gazans can begin to rebuild their lives. I pay tribute to the tireless diplomatic efforts of Qatar, Egypt, and the incoming and outgoing US administration. Much remains to be done to implement all phases of the deal in a full and establish a path to a lasting peace and security for Israelis and Palestinians alike. From our first day in office, this government has pressed for an immediate ceasefire to free the hostages, to bring relief, reconstruction, and hope to civilians who have suffered so much. We will play our full part in the coming days and weeks, working alongside our partners to seize the chance for a better future. So Lammy says they pressed for a ceasefire from their first day in office. Well, what about before then? They were allergic to the word ceasefire and were one of the last people to call for it. Sarah, pretty remarkable, really. What do you make of both Starmer and Lammy's statements?
I really don't know what to make of Starmer's statement. I mean, when I'd read it, I was like, is this. Maybe this is. People might think I'm being a bit contentious here, but I think there is an absolute denial to recognise the massacre that's been happening on the Palestinian side. I feel like his language was picked so carefully that he wanted to remain as impartial as possible, but didn't recognize, I think, the harm that's been happening to Palestinians over this 15-month conflict. So and I saw statements calling his statement disgusting and that it was dripping in racism. Do I completely disagree with it? No, I don't. I think that he is being very cryptic in the way that he's trying to describe this conflict. And I think that goes for Western media as a whole in the way they've tried to depict this conflict. It's been very, very picky and choosy with the words that they try to describe the suffering of Palestinians and the the I guess the sympathy that they are showing to Israelis. And I do think that sympathy should be on both sides, absolutely. But I think there has to be a recognition when it comes to the harm that Palestinians have been facing, when it comes to the land that that is theirs. So
Yeah. But the bias is absolutely just unreal, right? We've
Rampant.
got we've got a report from Amnesty International accusing them of genocide. We've got Human Rights Watch. I can't remember if they chose the word genocide or ethnic cleansing. We have Doctors Without Borders saying it's ethnic cleansing. We've got other smaller organizations as well who've also now finally made those claims and determined that for themselves. We've got reporting from the
Mm.
New York Times, the Guardian, CNN showing how Israeli soldiers have been using Palestinians as human shields. We've got decades worth of reporting from the UN and also Israeli human rights organizations showing the complete destruction of Gaza and the West Bank outside of wartime, the taking over of settlements, the imprisonment of children, the imprisonment of adults without cause under military arrest, which can subvert basic human rights, like the whole kind of Guantanamo style thing. We have reports of Palestinians literally being sexually abused in prisons.
Yeah.
We have a cabinet member who has been done for terrorism offences, who David Cameron said that he wanted to, before they were kicked out of power, to sanction. And that's David Cameron. Why are the Conservative government considering sanctions? And Labour can't even do that against these cabinet ministers who are so extreme. Um, Even the UK still recognises that Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, the Golan Heights are occupied territories. Why is it that we can't even show the same sympathy that they show the Israelis towards the Palestinians? It simply reeks of bias, reeks of
It does.
racism, and it's just frustrating that this is
It's so
what it's coming
frustrating. I
to.
think completely enrages me. So when I'd seen that statement, I'd read it, and I was like, "This is absolutely like it's heinous to think that this is still where we're at when it comes to, I guess, not really interrogating the issue of confronting the hard truth when it comes to the suffering of Palestinians." I think we're doing an absolute disservice when we don't recognise the trauma that they've had to endure. And the continued suffering that is still going on, despite words of a ceasefire coming into the picture. So I think there's an absolute deniability there, and it is just like some of the supporters who will continue to march in London, and rightfully so, that his rhetoric and his verbiage is disgusting,
Mm.
given that it's so cryptic in nature and does show so much sympathy to Israelis, but not so much to Palestinians. So yeah, enraging.
Well, let's quickly talk about some people who don't care about Palestinians, because now, even though the peace in the region is the most important thing, it seems for two individuals in the US, what matters most is who helped broker the deal. President Joe Biden and President elect Donald Trump are both claiming credit for Israel and Hamas agreeing to a ceasefire deal in Gaza on Wednesday after the White House brought Trump's Middle East envoy to negotiations that have dragged on for months. Trump wasted no time in asserting he was the moving force behind the deal, whose final details were still being ironed out, and that's according to the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. Biden, meanwhile, stressed that the deal was reached under the precise contours of a plan that he set out in May. This epic ceasefire agreement could have only happened as a result of our historic victory in November, as it signaled to the entire world that my administration would seek peace and negotiate deals to ensure the safety of all Americans and our allies. That's what Trump wrote on social media. I am a thrilled American. I am thrilled American and Israeli hostages will be returning home to be reunited with their families and loved ones. Uh, Fighting over who gets credit, like, just so, but this is what Biden had to say. Biden said from the White House. Sorry, Biden said from. Biden said from. I can't get my words out, guys. It's almost the end. Biden said from the White House that my diplomacy never ceased in their efforts to get this done. It is the result not only of the extreme pressure that Hamas has been put under and the changed regional equation after the ceasefire in Lebanon and the weakening of Iran, but also of dogged and painstaking American diplomacy. Maybe one day I'll be able to speak English properly. It's just one of those days. I do find it funny that Biden talks about diplomacy when his government has been aiding the genocide for over a year and refusing to halt arms sales being sold to Israel. So the deal proposed by Biden has been rejected repeatedly by Netanyahu, but almost immediately after Trump sent an envoy to Israel, they agreed. It's clear that Trump was actually the one who pressured Israel to accept a deal, which most likely would have broken the Logan Act, since Trump isn't actually allowed to negotiate as a private citizen, given that he isn't the president yet. Of course, Trump has been negotiating with Israel Israel for months, but the idea that Trump has been doing this for, altruistic reasons and for peace is unlikely. But rather, this may be a mirror of the Carter Reagan Iran scenario. That's when Jimmy Carter was president, when he was negotiating the release of 66 American hostages in Iran. Ronald Reagan was secretly negotiating with Iran to pause the hostage deal during the course of the US presidential election in a bid to hurt Carter's campaign, which is treason. It worked. Carter failed to secure the deal. Reagan got elected, and then suddenly a deal was reached. This was known as the October Surprise. Sarah, there's precedent for the presidential candidates to commit such acts of political gain. It's pretty clear Trump has done the same thing. Do you think?
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I can't trust Trump as far as I can throw him. And the irony as well, when you were speaking about Biden and the things that he's saying and coming out with, and I'm like, do you not recognize the complicity that you have in this genocide? That American weaponry has been used actively whilst
Mm.
throughout this conflict to cause and inflicts harm upon innocent civilians day in and day out. So there is a clear assault that has happened from the US on Gaza. But again, a deniability to recognize that that has happened. And then Trump coming into the picture, I think just stresses me out even more. But I put him in the same category as Biden. I think they're war crimes enthusiasts that engage in it on a daily basis, and that worries me severely going forward with Trump now coming into office in the upcoming week and next week.
Yeah,
Frightening.
so a
So
lot
yeah.
a lot of the reporting is saying from different sides. Like, I was listening to the New York Times earlier, their podcast. They were saying
Mm.
that it is Trump's envoy who actually helped get this deal through. Like, the reporting is
Apparently
accurate. It's Biden's deal. He couldn't get it across the line, and apparently this
true.
envoy, I can't even remember his name. Like, again, he has helped to push this across the line. I do agree with obviously the analysis that it's not because Trump actually cares. It's just that he's doing it for his own vanity. He's doing it for his own legacy. It's not that he actually cares
Yes.
about securing peace. I don't think he even cares about Israel in any way, especially the way Joe Biden does. But again, what's frustrating is that, like we were talking earlier about TikTok, Biden's
Yeah.
created this mess. Trump's going to be able to come in and save TikTok. It's the same thing. The same thing has
Yeah.
happened. The levers that Trump and his team might be pushing behind closed doors, because Netanyahu does not have that same influence over Trump than he does someone like Biden or the Israeli administration in general. The reporting has been saying that Trump has been like really hardline behind the scenes. That he's just going to be like, he's basically been saying like, "F Israel. If they don't do what I say, then we'll just cut them off." And despite the fact I hate giving Trump any credit on anything at all, because he's actually part of this problem. He's the one who made that situation in the occupied territories worse when he was in power. But he did the thing that Biden was supposed to do, because every time Biden said, "Don't go to Rafah,"
Mm.
cut off the don't cut off UNRWA, the agency that provides all the aid to Gazans. Don't do this, don't do that, or we'll do something really bad to you. And then they wait for the deadline
Yeah.
every time, and Israel never did what the US said. And then they just went off. They called their bluff every single time, and Biden never acted. And then Trump comes in, and now he gets to be the really hardline person and actually take credit for it, which is really frustrating, because again,
It
it's going to bolster him in the future.
It is frustrating. I mean, are Trump administration something to be afraid of? Absolutely. I'm afraid of what the things that will unfold from a Trump administration. But again, this is why I struggle to have any sort. I can't. I just struggle to give Trump any sort of credit in any way, shape whatsoever, because of the fact that I've always brandished him as a war crimes enthusiast, and he is someone who is very much profit orientated. Yes, he is super like staunch and hardlined, and I think does raise a few eyebrows when it comes to other political world leaders. But I cannot for the life of me even begin to give him credit, and I'm sure that I could in an ideal world I could, but because I know for a fact that he does not care about the Palestinians, and maybe to a certain degree, like you said, Israel, he is just trying to do this to assert his political
Mm.
dominance on a global sphere. He's like, look at what I've been able to do. Biden couldn't do it, Sleepy Joe couldn't do it, now I've done it. like I win. It's all about his ego and how he asserts himself, and that's why I don't. I mean, I'm not saying that you do trust him, Lewis. I
I
just
don't.
don't trust. I know you don't. I just really don't trust that man, and I can't give him credit. I just cannot, because this could have
Mm.
happened a long time ago, but it didn't. So yeah,
I think what scares me the most, again, and it adds on to so many other stories between Biden and Trump, is that Biden, foreign policy aside, the US economy is in a really good position. It's only about to get better because a lot of things that Biden has funded and passed are all about to start kicking off, creating lots of jobs. The economy is going to be, hopefully, in theory, doing really good. Biden banned TikTok, made a mess out of that. Trump's going to come in and sort it out. So he's walking into a good economy. He's going to say to all the young people, I'm going to bring TikTok back. He's going to be able to say to all those people who doubted him on his like peace efforts and how he's a peacemaker, and actually be like, well, look at me. I am a peacemaker. Biden has literally handed the guy who is like the most fascistic leader that the US has ever had, like success after success after success. And that's because of Biden's failures of
yeah,
not being able to step aside earlier, like he said he would years ago, and hand over to a new generation and somebody that could have beat Trump. And now we've got a guy in who said he's going to be a dictator on the first day, who is, we've got his defense secretary going through the Senate right now who doesn't want women in the army. They might be banning trans people from the army. We've got literal people in his cabinet who have been accused of doing very bad acts towards women, towards children. We've got the most insane US cabinet about to come in, and Biden has set them all up for lots of success. And it's very
yeah.
frustrating because people might actually think maybe fascism works, maybe Trump's work, and I don't know how to deal with that.
Neither.
We'll
He
have to
has
see.
given it to them on a silver platter, but you're absolutely right. We will have to see. I have lots of criticisms when it comes to the Biden administration, just as much as I have for the Trump administration. But I do think that one is insanely worse than the other in some ways. But I guess that could also be up for debate. Yeah, he has given it to them quite easily. Biden's failures really, really show, and Trump is here to save the day in his cape. So we'll see.
Right. That is almost about time for all the stories. I am so sorry that I have messed up so much of my English today, guys.
Same.
But of course, I want to thank Sarah for joining us today. Apologies for any tech issues. I'm going to make sure I'm a bit more caffeinated next time. But the one thing I just want to leave on with this story is that it's something that's been frustrating me. Um, this idea of like people just trying to claim credit, whether it's Biden, whether it's Trump or anybody else, is very frustrating because the people who deserve the most credit are the journalists on the ground in Gaza. We've had about 200 journalists that have been killed in Gaza, around that number, since October 7th. They've been risking their lives to bring us information, bring us news, and they've been killed. And they know when they put that press jacket on that it's supposed to protect them, but it doesn't. It makes them into a target. We should be thanking all the doctors, all the aid workers. I believe it's around 350 aid workers now that have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. People willingly going into Gaza to provide aid, to provide medicine, to provide things that people need, tents, knowing that when they go in, they might not come back out because Israel now has a long record of killing aid workers. We've got doctors who have been performing surgeries on children without anesthesia. We've got Gazans who have just obviously been dying in some days by the hundreds. We've got a new report that's just come out, which has actually been praised for its really good methodology, saying that the actual number of dead Palestinians is probably somewhere in the region of around 70 to 80,000 because there's just so many bodies buried under the rubble. When we're talking about who gets credit for this, it's these people. It's the journalists on the ground. It's the journalists around the world who, there's few of them, but who've actually been doing a good job keeping this story out there. Whether it's people like Mehdi Hassan, whether it's academics like Normal Finkelstein, whether it's TikTokers like Chris Kunzler, these types of people who've been keeping the story going and informing people on this. These are the people who should be credited towards a ceasefire because they've kept the pressure up. It's the Palestinian protesters who've been doing encampments. It's the Palestinian protesters who've been going out every single day, every single week for the last 450 days-ish since this all started. These are the people who should be credited for a ceasefire, because without any of that pressure, without any of these stories, without any of these people risking their lives, we wouldn't know what's going on. So Biden and Trump can just go fuck themselves, because they're complicit in this. And they deserve no credit, and I hope they go down in history, both of them, as people who helped facilitate a genocide, because that's who they are. With that little spiel being over, I obviously want to thank Sarah again for coming to join us. I want to thank Callum for producing the show. This was Normal Island Live, and we will be back for our debrief show on Saturday at 8 p.m. So I hope to see you there. Thank you very much.